I never remembered anything but myself. Gradually, however, my memory returned, or rather I returned to it, and in it I found the recollection that was awaiting me. But before telling you of it, allow me, mon cher compatriote, to give you a few examples. They'll be useful to you, I'm sure, of what I discovered in the course of my exploration. One day in my car, when I was slow in making a getaway at the green light, while our patient fellow citizens immediately began honking furiously behind me, I suddenly remembered another occasion set in similar circumstances. A motorcycle ridden by a spare little man wearing spectacles and +4s had gone around me and planted himself in front of me at the red light. As he came to a stop, the little man had stalled his motor and was vainly trying to revive it. When the light changed, I asked him with my usual courtesy to take his motorcycle out of the way so that I might pass. The little man was getting irritable over his wheezy motor, hence he replied, according to the rules of Parisian courtesy, that I could go and climb a tree. I insisted, still polite, but with a slight shade of impatience in my voice. I was immediately told in no uncertain terms that I could go to hell. Meanwhile, several horns began noisily behind me. With great firmness, I begged my interlocutor to be polite and to realise that he was blocking the traffic. The irascible character, probably exasperated by the now evident ill temper of his motor, informed me that if I wanted what he called a thorough dusting off, he would gladly give it to me. Such cynicism filled me with a healthy rage, and I got out of my car with the intention of thrashing this foul-mouthed individual. I don't think I'm cowardly, but what doesn't one think? I was a head taller than my adversary, and my muscles have always been sound. I still believe the dusting off would have been received rather than given. But I hardly had set foot on the pavement when from the gathering crowd a man stepped forth, rushed at me, informed me that I was the scum of the earth, and he would not allow me to strike a man who had a motorcycle between his legs and hence was at a disadvantage. I turned towards this musketeer, and in truth didn't even see him. Indeed, hardly had I turned my head when almost simultaneously I heard the motorcycle begin popping again and received a violent blow on the ear. Before I had time to register what had happened, the motorcycle drove away. Dazed, I mechanically walked towards D'Artagnan, when at the same moment an exasperated concert of horns rose from the now considerable line of vehicles. The light was changing to green. Then, still somewhat bewildered, instead of giving a drubbing to the idiot who had addressed me, I docilely returned to my car and started up. Well, as I passed, the idiot greeted me with a silly ass that I still recall. A totally insignificant story, do you think? Probably. Still, it took me some time to forget it. And that's the point. Yet I had excuses. I had let myself be beaten without replying, but I could not be accused of cowardice. Taken by surprise, addressed from both sides, I'd mixed everything up, and the motor horns had put the finishing touch to my embarrassment. Yet I was unhappy about this, as if I had violated the code of honour. I could see myself getting back into my car without any reaction, under the ironic gaze of a crowd especially delighted because, as I recall, I was wearing a very elegant blue suit. I could hear the silly ass, which in spite of everything struck me as justified. In short, I'd collapsed in public. As a result of a series of circumstances, to be sure, but there are always circumstances. As an afterthought, I clearly saw what I should have done. I saw myself felling D'Artagnan with a good hook to the jaw, getting back into my car, pursuing the monkey who had struck me, overtaking him, jamming his machine against the curb, taking him aside, and giving him the licking he had fully deserved. With a few variants, I ran off this little film 100 times in my imagination. But it was too late, and for several days I gnawed on a feeling of bitter resentment. Oh, it's raining again. Let's stop, shall we, under this portico. Good. Where was I? Oh yes, honour. Well, when I recovered the recollection of that episode, I realised what it meant. After all, my dream had not stood up to facts. I had dreamed, this was now clear, of being a complete man who managed to make himself respected in his person as well as in his profession. Half Sudan, half de Gaulle, if you will. In short, I wanted to dominate in all things. This is why I put on airs, made a particular point of displaying my physical skill rather than my intellectual gifts. But after having been struck in public without reacting, it was no longer possible for me to cherish that fine picture of myself. If I'd been the friend of truth and intelligent I claimed to be, what would that episode have mattered to me? It was already forgotten by those who'd witnessed it. I'd have barely accused myself of having got angry over nothing, and also having got angry of having not managed to face up to the consequences of my anger, for want of presence of mind. Instead of that, I was eager to get my revenge, to strike and conquer, as if my true desire were not to be the most intelligent or most generous creature on earth, but only to beat anyone I wanted, to be the stronger, in fact, and in the most elementary way. The truth is that every intelligent man, as you know, dreams of being a gangster and of ruling over society by force alone. As it is not so easy as the detective novels might lead one to believe, one generally relies on politics and rushes to join the cruelest party. What does it matter, after all, if by humiliating one's mind one succeeds in dominating everyone? I discovered in myself sweet dreams of oppression. I learned at least that I was on the side of the guilty, the accused, only exactly insofar as their crime caused me no harm. Their guilt made me eloquent because I was not its victim. When I was threatened, I became not only a judge in turn, but even more, an irascible master who wanted, regardless of all laws, to strike down the offender and get him on his knees. After that, mon cher compatriote, it's very hard to continue seriously believing one has a vocation for justice and is the predestined defender of the widow and orphan. Since the rain's coming down harder and we have the time, may I share with you another discovery I made soon after in my memory? Let's sit down on this bench out of the rain. For centuries, pipe smokers have been watching the same rain falling on the same canal. What I have to tell you is a bit more difficult. This time it concerns a woman. To begin with, you must know that I always succeeded with women, and without much effort. I don't say succeed in making them happy, or even making myself happy through them. No, simply succeed. I used to achieve my ends just about whenever I wanted. I was considered to have charm. Fancy that. You know what charm is. A way of getting the answer yes without having asked any clear question. And that was true of me at the time. Does that surprise you? Come now, don't deny it. With the face I now have, that's quite natural. Alas, after a certain age, every man is responsible for his face. Mine, but it doesn't matter. It's a fact. I was considered to have charm, and I took advantage of it. Without calculation, however, I acted in good faith, or almost. My relationship with women was natural, free, easy, as the saying goes. no guile in it, except that obvious guile which they look upon as a homage. I love them, according to the hallowed expression, which amounts to saying that I never loved any of them. I always considered misogyny vulgar and stupid, and almost all the women I have known seem to me better than I. Nevertheless, setting them so high, I made use of them more often than I served them. How can one make it out? Of course, true love is exceptional, 2 or 3 times a century, more or less. The rest of the time there is vanity or boredom. As for me, in any case, I was no Portuguese nun. I'm not hard-hearted, far from it, full of pity on the contrary, and with a ready tear to boot. Only my emotional impulses always turn towards me. My feelings of pity concern me. It's not true, after all, that I never loved. I conceived at least one great love in my life, of which I was always the object. From that point of view, after the inevitable hardships of youth, I had settled down early on. Sensuality alone dominated my love life. I looked merely for objects of pleasure and conquest. Moreover, I was aided in this by my looks. Nature had been generous with me. I was considerably proud of this, and derived many satisfactions therefrom, without my knowing now whether they were due to physical pleasure or to prestige. Of course you will say that I'm boasting again. I shan't deny it, and I'm hardly proud of doing so, for here I'm boasting of what is true. In any case, my sensuality, to limit myself to that, was so real that even for a 10-minute adventure I'd have disowned father and mother, even were I to regret it bitterly. Nay, especially for a 10-minute adventure, and even more so if I was sure it was to have no sequel. I had principles, to be sure, such as that the wife of a friend is sacred, but I simply ceased, quite sincerely, a few days before, to feel any friendship for the husband. Maybe I ought not to call this sensuality. Sensuality is not repulsive. Let's be indulgent and use the word infirmity, a sort of congenital inability to see in love anything but the physical. That infirmity, after all, was convenient. Combined with my faculty for forgetting, it favoured my freedom. At the same time, through a certain appearance of inaccessibility and unshakable independence, it provided the opportunity for new successes. As a result of not being romantic, I gave romance something to work on. Our feminine friends have this in common with Bonaparte, that they always think they can succeed where everyone else has failed. In this exchange, moreover, I satisfied something in addition to my sensuality, my passion for gambling. Amongst women, I loved those who would be my partners in a sort of game, which has at least the taste of innocence. You see, I can't endure being bored and appreciate only the diversions of life. Any society, however brilliant, soon crushes me, whereas I have never been bored with the women I liked. It hurts me to confess it, but I'd have given 10 conversations with Einstein for a first meeting with a pretty chorus girl. It's true that at the 10th meeting I was longing for Einstein or a serious book. In short, I was never concerned with the major problems, except in the intervals between my little excesses. And how often, standing on the pavement involved in a passionate discussion with friends, I lost the thread of the argument being developed because a devastating woman was crossing the street at that very moment.